Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. We're moving along with the John Pennisi interview series, former made member of the Lucchese crime family. We're taking a little detour today. We're going to call this the anniversary, anniversario, of the Castellano hit on December 16th, 1985. I'm going to focus in on John's blog and sit down news and talk a little bit about what happened with the hit, what happened, what transpired later, and then a huge tie-in with the Lucchese and the Genovese family. John Pennisi, welcome back to the New Theory podcast. How you doing today?
All right, Tom, how are you?
Good. So you boldly named your last blog about the anniversary of the killing to Quack Quack got Big Paul whacked. So first let's talk about the headline. Who's Quack Quack and how did he get Big Paul whacked?
He's that was his nickname. That's Angelo Ruggiero.
Okay.
And there was a combination of issues, but I look at it like, like a fire. The firemen look for the point of ignition.
Correct.
The point of ignition was that Angelo Ruggiero gets indicted on a heroin trafficking case, and that sparks the whole thing off. That's really what set things in motion, because it ultimately led to what happened.
Okay, so you're referring to the murder of Paul Castellano and Tommy Blanc.
Correct.
Okay, so let's build this up a little bit. So Angelo Ruggiero is at the time a captain in the Gambino family, correct?
No, Angelo, Johnny Gotti's the captain, of the family, of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club crew. They call him the Bergen crew. He was the capo-regime for that crew.
Got it. Okay, so God is captain, Angelo's soldier, and
Correct.
he gets indicted over a pretty heavy heroin charge, 50 kilos, and then with a few other folks as well.
Jeannie Gotti gets indicted with him. Johnny Caniglia gets indicted with him, and a whole bunch of guys get indicted. So you have friends that are indicted on the case, and the background, in case anybody is not familiar with it, is that Paul Castellano takes over the family. He's appointed by Carlo Gambino, and he keeps his rules. And one of the rules by Carlo Gambino was that if a member gets caught dealing drugs, it's the death penalty. So he honors his predecessor's rules, and he's going to enforce it. So when news of the arrest and the indictment, and they're indicted on this case, he, meaning Paul, is not very happy. He's very angry that members of his family are violating one of the rules.
A big rule. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and I'm just going by other interviews that I did. Gene Borello said that, and he was an associate, didn't claim to be a made guy, but he was an associate, and he said that a lot of the made guys, when you kick up to them, if the envelope's heavy and they know it's from drugs, they look the other way. When you obviously kick up to your skipper, your captain, they're heavy, might be some drug money. So what's worse? So if you're John Gotti, right, and you're a captain of your crew, I'm assuming Angelo, his brother, etc., are kicking up to him, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Dumb question, but are they kicking up this drug money to John, seeing fat envelopes of people looking the other way, or worse, probably not kicking up at all because they don't want them to even ask, hey, what are you doing? Are you working in drugs? Just give us that dynamic, because that interests me.
I mean, in that scenario, look, John Gotti's definitely taking money from the drug business through them. They're giving him a cut of what they're making. There's no doubt about it that they were. He's not going to announce it. He's going to take the money, whether the envelope's heavy or very heavy, he's going to take it and put it in his pocket.
Yeah.
What he does with that after that, I mean, you know, in history, we know that, and anyone who knew him knew that he was a very bad gambler.
Yeah.
So he probably was blowing that money on football games. And, you know, I don't think it was so much that, you know, he was handed a large envelope or whatever it may be, and turned around and said, "Hey, you know, this better not be from the drug business. You know, we're not supposed to. You know, you know, it's it's it would be a joke that he's taking that money,
Yeah.
knowing very well where it's coming from, and a lot of people, I'm sure, have done the same. But when it comes to a stickler for the rules, you know, and Paul he wants to make an example out of somebody that's violating them.
Got it. Now, give me the mind frame of a gangster, right? So you're Angelo Ruggiero. Back then, it was the 80s. These guys were making millions back then. And you had the opportunity to deal an H at like 50, I think it was like 15K a kilo, probably buying it for like nothing. I know they weren't distributing retail. They're probably doing wholesale, I would guess. But my point being is, give me the mind frame of a gangster. He's just like, fuck it. I'm just going to risk my life to make, 5 million, or, like just give me the inside mind of a gangster and how
Well,
the thought process works.
well, first of all, he was not the first one in the business. It was his brother Sally,
Right.
and Sal was in the business heavy, and he was a big earner in the drug business.
Right.
So now when he dies in a I don't know if it was a I think it was a plane crash, and he dies in a crash, and they go, and meaning Angelo and Johnny Koenig and Gene, and they take over his business. So the mindset is, we're going to make millions of dollars. You know, they're not even thinking, guy's not thinking about, we're not allowed to sell. One of our rules is that we can't be in the drug business when, they're stashing away millions and millions of dollars. They're not, what are they going to do? They're going to say, well, let's leave this business alone. And let's do a little loan sharking and gambling.
Right.
You know, it's fast money. I had a guy one time tell me, the heroin business, he says, I'll explain it to you like this. Today, you're driving a Toyota. In a week or two, you're driving a Mercedes. It was a big turnover, big money business. And that was their mindset. Their mindset is, a wise guy's mindset is always to put $1 in his pocket.
Yeah.
And if he could put multiple dollars in his pocket, for the most part, certain guys do care. They don't care. They're just going to do whatever it is to put that money in their pocket.
Now, I never really thought about this until you and I talked about it. So when you got a guy like, I guess one of the Gottis, or a Gene Gotti, whoever, or Sal Ruggiero, was Sal Ruggiero made, as far as you know?
I to be honest with you, I don't know the answer. He may have been a friend, but I don't know the answer to that. You're talking about a long time ago, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So my question is, and we'll and forgive me because I like kind of go off, but people like these little nuances. So back then, right? So would they get it from the Sicilians, because I know they were big importers of H? Who would supply them as far as maybe back then? Because I know you were like growing up back then, Howard Beach, that was your area. So if you were to get a hold of that kind of weight, who were they getting it from?
Well, one of their biggest connections was Mark Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Ryder had the connection with the could even went to Nicky Barnes, like Maddie dealt with Nicky Barnes.
Yeah.
Mark Ryder dealt in that business. So, with him, he was also indicted on the case. With him, I don't believe they were getting it from the Sicilians. I don't believe that that's where it was coming from with them.
Yeah.
But it could have been. But I know that Mark was a mover and shaker in that business with them, and he was also, he was an associate. He was with that crew.
Got it. There was a little bit of a conspiracy theory that you know how there was Appalachian in 1957, obviously, where the doors got blown off, like
Correct.
national syndicate, right? And I'm going way back, but prior to that, in Sicily, Joe Bonanno, a few other, maybe Galante, a few other heavy hitters out of New York went to Sicily and had a big meeting with the Sicilian mob and kind of carved out and said, okay, you guys are going to import, we're going to do some distribution, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory goes Appalachian was a fallout of that meeting to develop like a better, 26 city network, right? And some of the theory goes, and this goes, I think it was Claire Sterling's book, The Octopus, way back. It's all way back stuff, but I just want to get your opinion. Is the theory is that the reason why the American Mafia weren't allowed dealing drugs, not just because of sentencing, but they worked out that it wasn't like the right racket to let the Sicilians do it. And then if you're a Sicilian mobster in the U.S., back in the day, you would pay tribute to the Italian American Mafia. What do you think of that? Is that probably like a little too far out there, or do you think there's some truth to that?
I mean, it's not like they're going to put a tax on them, but I mean, if that were true, and obviously that was not my era, not my time.
Yeah.
I would just think that they, what they would do is put a guy with a certain family. They don't straighten him out, and he's their guy. You know what I mean? He's their guy. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Sally was not a friend.
Yeah.
But it's similar to that. Is that, what does a guy in that position need a bond for? he's he don't need it.
Now, but so you got to forgive me because I'm stuck on this thing. So the Cherry Hill Gambinos, Joseph and Giuseppe and John, were probably one of the biggest H dealers in the country back then.
Yep.
They owned 200 pizzerias, and I think they were doing over $200 million a year on the books. God knows how much that is illegitimate, but on the books. And remember 18th Avenue, Brooklyn, they were there, and they were considered, I don't know if they were captains or whatever, John was a captain, but they were considered in the Gambino family, cousins of Paul Castellano.
Correct.
Served under Castellano and then Gotti. So how does it work with those guys that are theoretically in the Gambino family, but huge heroin importers? Like, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that era and the dichotomy of, I get it, you deal, you die, right? But
but at that time, and I'm not knowledgeable of when they became friends here.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about in this country.
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't friends yet. And then they were known to be in the business. There's a lot of guys that if you'll call them ex junk dealers, and maybe it's the truth that they're out of the business, but there's a lot of guys that were in the business, became friends, and then were no longer in the business. I mean, there are guys that followed the rules, but maybe Joe and John at that time were not friends. I don't know. That could be the answer. Or somebody turned a blind eye to the fact that they were.
Got it. Now go back to the story. So where you left off there was, and thank you for that, by the way. So where you left off there was Angelo Ruggiero is about to get indicted or getting indicted. There's tapes. I know there's tapes, and there's some stuff brewing. And as I understand, Angelo Ruggiero had, according to your blog, had a pretty big mouth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So he was known, and this was known in our neighborhood. Anybody who knows us know he naturally talk loud too, and he was always yapping, But he had no problem speaking on the phone when they were leery. Guys were leery of the phone, especially when you're in the junk business. Now you're leery of the phones. You should be, right? For all intents and purposes, you should be leery. And he just didn't you know, I guess he I guess he either just didn't care or he wasn't sharp enough to say, "Let me watch what I say." And like I said, it wasn't only that he spoke about the drug business; he was bad mouthing everybody. He didn't care, and that's probably some of the. I mean, obviously, the biggest reason why he didn't want to hand the tapes over was self-preservation, one, and two, he didn't want to hurt any of his friends that wanted to tape, and then three, he didn't want people to hear what he felt about them because he would speak his mind. But he was definitely known as the guy who was uh, loved to talk.
So what happened next?
So what took place is that, and like I say, it was a combination of things, but that was the spark that set everything off. So now Paul is putting pressure to get. He wants the tapes, right? He knows they got the discovery, and if anybody people don't know when there's a case, now you start getting your discovery material, and obviously the wiretap tapes were part of that, and he's asking for them because he wants to hear it for himself, what is being said on the tapes, and he'll know. They probably bullshit and said they made up a case. The government, is making a case up against us, and it's not true. So, the tapes tell a story, and Neil, he's very lucky because he had Neil. Neil was a relative also of him, of Angelo, Neil Della Croce. So Neil is the underboss at that time, and Neil is kind of playing the mediator and holding off Paul. He's giving him excuses that they're coming up with them, they're going to get him, and Angelo does not want to turn over the tapes. So now there's talk of um, breaking John Gotti, meaning that they want to break him down. They want to take his skipper position from him, because now he's got to look at it and say, well, you're my capo regime. That's your crew. You're going to tell me that you don't know. He's not stupid. Like we just said, you're going to tell me you didn't know, and you're not taking money. You're a part of this too. So now they're looking to break John down, right? Which his ego is not going to let him do that. He's not going to take a backward step. He's not going to now get broken down to a soldier and lose his crew. And so that's one of the things that he heard, obviously, from Neil, right? Because Neil's hearing it from Paul. And then the other set of circumstances was they're also going to disband the crew, meaning they're going to break them up so they could break up a crew and put soldiers with different regimes, with different guys.
Right.
And they could put these three over here with this crew, and this Angelo over here. If they didn't kill him, Johnny Gotti could go with a crew because now we don't have a crew. And that all played a part in it too, in what ultimately took place. So they're not handing the tapes over, and Angelo is adamant he's not going to hand the tapes over. Obviously, John Gotti could have made Angelo hand those tapes over, but he's not, right? To see, he could have told him, "Give me the tapes," and we're handing them in, and he didn't, and nobody's really pushing, and obviously Paul is getting very aggravated with them because let's not forget who he is. He's the boss. He's he's saying, "I want them." And usually when a boss says, "I want something," you need to produce, right? And they're not producing and they're not giving them up. And it comes to the point, as far as John Gotti goes, yes, people could say, well, he made this move to take over, right? Yeah, sure, that's part of it. But once again, like Angelo, it was self-preservation. He knew a few things were going to happen. Number one is people were going to get killed. Angelo was going to be the first one, possibly even himself, right? Because they're not going to just let they're not just going to let guys in their crew get killed.
Correct.
So that's a possibility. And he does not want to be broken down to a soldier. He had a big ego, and he didn't want that either. So that combination of things, and then the biggest um um what would you say, the biggest piece of the puzzle was that Neil was an old time gangster, through and through, and he followed the rules. So and you can see not only from the blog, everywhere it's written about him, in these conversations that they picked up on wiretaps, when he's speaking, he's speaking true Cosa Nostra, saying the boss is the boss. So he's showing what his character is about, right? And that is the reason why they were kept calm, and they were keeping their cool in this situation. And I mean they, meaning the whole John Gotti crew, because Neil was keeping them in check. When Neil passes away, it said, oh, well, they felt it was a slight, that Paul didn't go. Paul had a case. He didn't want to. He's the boss. He didn't want to put himself out there and go to the wake. That had nothing to do with it. There's so many bosses that would have never went. They had a case. There's bosses that don't have cases, that don't go to wakes. That had nothing to do with it. But they felt like that was a slap in the face. It's bullshit. Neil was holding the dogs back, so to speak, right? When he passes away, not only what did they lose? They lost their rabbi, right? They don't have Neil now. You're talking about the number 2 guy, right?
Yeah.
The position should have been his, that he should have been the boss. But that just goes to show you, once again, his character. He accepted it, right? He accepted that Carlo Gambino put his family member in that position, and bypassed a guy like himself that deserved it. So when they lose Neil, they know, meaning John Gotti knows, he has to act immediately, because now the person who was their rabbi, and who was advocating for them, is now dead. So they had no choice, in all honesty, but to make the move they did. They had no choice, because have they not made that move, Tom, what happens? Angelo's getting killed right away. That's right off the bat. He's going, and then who else is next? You got to worry about Jeannie getting killed. You got to worry about Johnny Kinnick getting killed, and everybody else. You got to worry now the associates getting killed, and they may wipe them out. Then they're gonna disband that crew, and Johnny Gotti, if he does not get killed, is going to be knocked down to a soldier, which, and that's they had no choice. But the reason why I say Quack Quack gets Paulie killed, right, is because it's the point of ignition, and that was the start of all of these things that came after that, right? Look what happened. All of these things come after that. The only reason they don't come to fruition is because they take him out. They have no choice. It's self-preservation for the whole crew.
So okay, so we'll move forward with the hit, right? So the hit happens. We're on the 35th anniversary, or whatever the numbers work, and it obviously changes American history, changes U.S. history, mob history, New York history. I mean, every single facet, right? So let's kind of fast forward a little bit how the Lucchese's got involved. So who got hit in retribution? Because something like this doesn't go unanswered. And then where did it kind of like? Because I want to get back into your wheelhouse in terms of the Lucchese's and where you guys fit in. So I understand there's obviously that was not going to go unanswered, and there was a serious hit not too long after.
You had Frankie DeChico
Yeah.
that mistakenly was killed because they thought that it was John Gotti walking back out of the club to the car.
Wow.
They, from the distance, they thought it was John, and John was the target. It was not Frankie DeChico. And obviously, you know, once again, I'm not speaking firsthand. I just heard things and what I read and what I know. But it was Chin who was making the you know, who put the hit on John. You know, he wanted retaliation for an unsanctioned hit against a sitting boss, and he got obviously gas pipe was involved in that, Vic, and that, you know, the Lucchese Pagata was involved in helping to get rid of John, so that Frankie DeChico gets blown up by accident
Wow. So mistaken idea, and it was on 86th Street in the middle of friggin'
in the middle of the daytime. Yeah,
insane.
and you know, you hear from Sammy the Boast podcast, or he's told this story numerous times, that, you know, they went over to the car and tried to pull this guy out. This guy was blown. You know, there was nothing really left of him. His insides, he was blown up bad. And then you have Eddie Leno, right? Eddie Leno gets hit on the service road of the Bell Parkway, and you know, we come to find out they used these two corrupt cops, right, that they had, and that they blast Eddie Leno, and then uh, Bobby Barriello,
Borriello, right?
he gets hit. So, you know, there's people that went over this, and meanwhile, I think that the attention and the, not only was he in the limelight, but the law enforcement was all over John Gotti. I believe that helped him, obviously, because it was, you know, he's a harder target to get.
Yeah.
You know, he was a harder target to get. But, you know, it did damage to them. You know, that did damage. They hit close people to him. You know, Frankie was a big loss to them, and so was Eddie Leno and Bobby, and they you know, they paid the price for his sins.
So you're, and you know, as I understand that John Gotti Sr. had, you know, huge ego, and I listened
Correct.
to part of Sammy's podcast that dropped today, and they were supposed to go retribution against the Chin, and I think even like your, you know, the Casey guys, and it got called off. Before we get there, though, is I just can't imagine that they hit three people in his family, even though like he did wrong, and then they hit back. Nothing else really happened after that. So why did they call off to Chin? And was it like a backdoor deal? Was okay, you know what, like peace? As far as you know, what happened after that? That's kind of a big deal because I don't see John Gotti Sr. ever sending down to anybody. But it seems like they, you know, they hit him a few times.
I believe that they sat down with Chin, and I believe that they denied everything, and that you know, both sides are going to deny it. You know, remember something, when look at the media attention that you have. Castellano gets hit. Look at that media attention. Look at the media attention that happens after the Chico gets blown up,
Yeah.
and the other hits as well. It's bad business because they're, you know, the one thing that they don't lose focus on is money.
Yeah.
and they're going to be, there's to have a war with either the West Side, which is the Genovese family, or the Lucchese family. It's not just going to be a 1-for-1 thing. There's going to be a war.
Yeah.
Is bad business. So
Interesting.
rather than have that, I don't know about making peace, but I do believe that they sat down over it.
Interesting. Now, you said something interesting where the reason why they did the bombing and the reason why they had to do something is if you're a chin and they're knocking off bosses and it's okay to do so.
Yeah,
Show
we spoke about this. Yeah. So you got to remember something. Let's say Chin didn't even like Paul Castellano.
Correct.
He's got to think of himself. If he doesn't act, and he does not want anybody else to get these kind of ideas and say, wait a minute, they just took out a sitting boss and
Correct.
his captains, a group of them sided with a guy that was going to do this. Maybe I'm going to have this in my Bagada. And that's probably listen, not taking away that he was an old school by the book guy, and he was, but that also played a big part in his mind. There's no doubt about it.
Interesting. So there's more to it, folks. So, and John and I were chatting about this. This is why we wanted to call a special show where the Angelo Ruggiero story doesn't stop there. He puts a hit on the old Lucchese boss Casso, correct?
Correct.
Why?
So it was over drugs, and it was over a drug beef, and and also, he is going to get the permission from John, because don't forget, he's involved, and they know, the street does its homework. They know where things come from and whatnot. So, yeah, he puts a hit out on gas pipe, and he uses this kid, what's his name? You mentioned his name, Heidel. Yeah,
Who's a nephew of a super
of
yeah.
I think he was Danny Marino, right?
Yeah.
And he puts this kid on, done in an amateur way. You know what I mean? As you could see, look at the difference between how a hit is supposed to go down and how a bumbled hit goes, and that was a bumbled hit. In the Sparks hit, you could believe. You see, they had shooters all over. They had backup shooters.
Yeah.
They had walkie-talkies. They definitely scoped the area out before they did it. They knew which exits they were going to leave, which blocks they were going to leave, what crash cars. They had crash cars. They were set up professionally to do that. Hit went down like a piece of bread, and they sent an amateur. You could send anybody with a gun, but that doesn't mean that it's going to get done. And they sent this kid out there, and he didn't get the job done. and that could have been. I mean, look what the end result was for him. They wind up torturing this kid, and he gives Angelo up.
Yeah. So what happened after that? So he had to shelve Angelo. He didn't kill him.
Well, you got to remember something. Angelo gets shelved as an appeasement because they wanted his head. They want, don't forget, he's putting a hit on another friend and a boss, no less.
Yeah.
So John Gotti saves Angelo by shelving him. That's he should have got they should have killed him, but they shelved him for that.
Does it lend itself to the power of John Gotti at that time that he's able to save his friend, or at that time maybe a little weakness of Casso? Because like I listen to our own podcast and you talk about rules,
right.
And they're kind of like an unsanctioned hit on an underboss from another family, which is like a super no-no, bigger than drugs, I assume. So when he got his hand caught in the cookie jar there and he survived, what do you think? A little maybe, but God is strong enough to keep him at bay. Castro's not strong enough. Give us that dynamic. I'm super interested in that.
I mean, what comes into play in that dynamic is that they were very good friends with Vic. And Vic was a gentleman. Gas Pipe was a psychopath madman, but Vic, Vic was a gentleman. A stone cold killer, tough guy, but he was a gentleman, and they had a good relationship with him as well. So I think that played a big part in it of how they save Angelo.
Interesting. Now,
also one other thing.
Go ahead.
I am sure that the Frankie DeChico incident comes up where you took one of our guys out. You were looking to kill me, of all people, meaning John telling them this. And now, all right, you didn't get killed. It was a bumbled hit, but we'll shelf it. You got to remember something, Tom. Shelving certain guys is just as bad as killing them today.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yes. So like to Angelo, all he knew was this life.
Yeah. And
it was like killing him inside, internally killing him.
Interesting. You break him, as they say. So let's talk about like outcomes before we conclude. So Angelo Ruggiero, I believe, dies
has cancer. He gets out on bail. As a matter of fact, my mother and I were living on Remsen Avenue and Avenue J, and a guy by the name of Tony Muscatello brings Angelo down into our basement, and I wasn't allowed to come down. And they have a meeting with Angelo right before he passes away, and he was very, very sick. So yes, he did get out. He was out.
Interesting. So he passes. Obviously, what happens to John Gotti Jr. Castle, I believe, is fighting COVID in a respirator now.
Yeah, I read something about that.
And obviously, Vic Amuzzo's in jail as well. So, like, fast forward to your era, you mentioned that you did kind of deal with, Vic Amuzzo's, what is it, son-in-law,
Joey.
Yeah, and my question is, I'm like, I'm obsessed with this stuff because I live the history of it. To me, it's like being an historian, right? But you lived it, right? So, like because you're related to a Muzzo, you're related to a Gotti, you're related to whoever, right? Does that still hold weight in the current 2020, up to when you served? Did that hold weight being legacy to some of these guys, or did it not really matter because it was so long ago?
I mean, I would say yes and no, because because they're going to respect, these guys and who they were, and then no, because they're going to judge whoever that is by how they carry themselves as an individual. You know what I mean? So Joey's going to be judged by Joey DiBenedetto, not by Vic. I mean, I'm sure if there was ever any kind of trouble, Vic could help him out, but you're going to be judged by how you carry yourself.
Got it. Now, with law enforcement after that, obviously RICO case was already happening with Giuliani, but it became a super force. Obviously, after Gotti's era, things kind of quieted down. If anything, like you're showing us that it's alive and well. As far as you remember, when you got back or got into the life, what are some of the things that changed when you got there as a direct result of the Castellano hit? Like, was it, some old timers come to you and say, yeah, it used to be this, but we do this now because of Gotti's fault or Castellano's hit, or
it not necessarily the Castellano hit, that in itself was what it was.
Yeah.
It was everything changed after John Gotti.
Yeah.
And the reason being was the flashiness was, you'll hear guys say, John Gotti single-handedly took the mob down. John Gotti was the worst thing that ever happened to the mob. Look, John Gotti was a true blue gangster. Everybody knows that. I said from when he woke up in the morning till he went to bed at night, till the day he died, right? Till the day he died. And, so as far as a person being meant for the life, 100%, he was meant for the life. How he went about the life was not under the best circumstances, and he was, way too out there, too much exposure, too flamboyant, too flashy. So with that being said, to answer your question, we, and not only myself, everything changed after. You didn't see wise guys in suits no more.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there was a wake or an occasion, but everything got toned down. The clubs got closed, right? Most clubs all got closed. So everything in that life changed, and they learned from the mistakes that John Gotti made. And that was a big part. So it wasn't necessarily the Castellano hit. It was John himself, that guys learned from the mistakes that he made, and the heat that was brought on by making these mistakes, and they adjusted.
Interesting.
Yeah. But one more thing that I think that we should answer is that I seen somebody ask a question on your podcast, and they said, well, they're worried about a guy, a rule that if a guy deals junk, because of the large sentence he's going to get. But on the other hand, what about whacking a guy or killing a guy? The difference is, it's a good question, but the difference is, and you and I spoke offline, that in the drug business, you're in the business every day. So every day you have the exposure to get pinched, right? You have every day you could be under surveillance, you could be indicted, you could get locked up, you could bring everybody down with 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 the drug business, because you're in the business every day, right? You're involved in it every day. Whereas a hit, you're not involved in that every day.
Correct.
And if we could talk back on the hits, we could count most of them, right?
Yeah.
You could kind of count them. But in comparison to drug dealing, you have more of a chance of catching an indictment in the drug business than on a hit. And that's the answer. That's the reason why that rule was set into place, because you have more of a chance and more exposure in the drug business of getting caught and getting that indictment and getting that lengthy sentence.
Yeah. So before we conclude, though, because we're going to go back to, I think we'll make this, I think it's part 5. And we're going to go to part 6. We're going to get back to questions. There's a ton of questions, like 350. we got to get to the highlights. But one of the questions I have is, I like to follow the progress of your borgata that you dealt with, the cases. And my question to you is, it was a rough go with like the war with Jersey, and there's a war, like it was just what, murder machine was crazy, right? And then they go away, and then there's a new administration. I think there's another administration. But you guys kind of held tight, and I would argue that you guys are pretty strong. There's a lot of guys still around. Like you mentioned, a lot of guys, and these guys are around. It's not like dead or they have long sentences. I think guys only got 2-3 years, and they're going to be out by next year. So like, what did you guys do right in your era to be one of the stronger regattas going, maybe versus some of the other ones? I'm kind of fascinated before we conclude, John.
It just, I think it was that you had good administrations in there. Even if, like it's been discussed, like Matty was a good guy, and Matty was, a tough guy, and Matty definitely belonged in a life. I don't believe boss material at all, but you had Stevie, and Stevie held that family together. And Stevie was boss material, and Stevie was strong. Stevie made right. You got to look at the head, right? You got to look at the head down. And if you have a good leader, even in business, you have a good company.
Correct.
Right? And so our company, his leader was Stevie. So I give the credit to Stevie, that Stevie held the family together, you know, and that's it. It's your, it all depends. Look at what Joe Messina did, you know, when he took over the family.
Yeah.
The family was in shambles, the family was in trouble, and he built them up. So, you know, all right, he ultimately took them down. I'm talking about prior to that.
Yeah.
He was a good leader, he was a good boss for that family. So, you know, the credit goes to him. So if your leader is strong, your family is strong because they have a strong leader that's
Yeah.
leading them. And that's really the answer to that.
Interesting.
And you know what? As a whole, you had a lot of good guys. You had a lot of old timers. You had a lot of good guys
Yeah.
in the Bagada, and that helped too. You know, that helped. You know what it is, Tom? There was a lot of there's a lot of money guys in the Lucchese's.
Yeah. I was gonna
You
say.
know, and money talks.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of money. You know, money equals strength, right? and so there was a lot of strength there from wealthy members of that family.
Interesting. Way to conclude with one last question. I'm going to throw you a curveball, and you got to answer it, John. Give us one thing you miss about the life. It's got to be something. Give us. Yeah, I know you changed. You're a good guy now. You're down a different path. You're sharing stories from the past. You're repented. We got it. Give us one.
Okay, I'll give you an easy one. So I'm going to answer your question in the
Please,
easiest way.
please.
I don't like waiting on lines in restaurants now.
I love it.
All right, that's my answer. But that's in all from my heart, in all honesty. Look, I loved my friends. I loved those guys, and I did prior to what took place. But I am in a much better place as we speak right now. I'm truly blessed. I have peace of mind. I have changed my whole life around. I don't even, and this is the truth, I'll get into it at another point.
Yeah.
But there came a time, and it has to do with a footbridge, and we could talk about it another time. I'll talk to you about it off camera. But I made a decision at one point, and when I made a decision, I take it to this extreme, that if I was in a supermarket, I would open up a water, open up a drink it, and put it on a shelf. Back then, I didn't care. I didn't care. You know, I will not. I have gone to the register with that empty bottle of water now. I will not even take a bottle of water. I will not. So I made a life-changing decision. And in a way, a lot of times in life, Tom, you know, misfortune blessings are disguised in misfortune. It was very misfortunate what took place and how it took place with me, you know, and it was hurtful for me what they did, but it turned out to be a blessing for me in the end.
John, it's not, as Christians, we believe it's not where you start, it's where you finish. So
Where you finish. And even with that being said, it is an anniversary today of a legendary hit, but you know, I also said my prayers for Paul Castellano, Tommy Bilotti, and John Gotti, anybody that was involved, Frankie DeChico, everybody that was involved in what happened today, 30 something years ago. I pray for their souls.
I agree, because they're, you know, still grandparents, parents,
Absolutely,
mothers, so forth.
absolutely.
So folks, we're gonna put the link to the blog below. Keep putting the questions. You can put questions here. We go through the questions before we go to the questions live. We're gonna have to like one or two more question series. We got over 50 questions, not including DMs and emails, for John Pennisi. And you know, I don't do this enough. Subscribe below, hit the notification button. That lets you know when our next one is. And we're gonna do one soon. This was meant to be kind of a topical one because of the anniversary. And John, thanks for your valuable time, and we'll see you next session.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff.